Alrighty, are we ready? The raid that fractured the Final Fantasy XIV community. So this is top, which was the next ultimate. So wait, did you get 2 ultimates in Endwalker? Well, I suppose they would have intended to release an... Okay, oh wow. So I suppose they would have been working on their Endwalker ultimate anyway, but it's just the Shadowbringers one that was delayed. So it just happened that it was released in Endwalker, right? Yeah, so... Wait, you'll get 2 in Dawn Trail? Yeah, but it was an unintended pattern, I think. You're supposed to have 2 each expansion. I mean, these fights look insane to develop, you know? Whoa, 2. What a spectacle that was. Imagine having 2 per expansion. Well, that would be like 1 a year, actually, when you break it down. Because isn't an expansion cycle like 2 years, or was that WoW? But there's a certain expansion cycle, isn't there? So it's like 1 a year, which, yeah, 1 a year. I mean, yeah. Oh, 3. Oh, no. Like, there is, the thing is, as much as that would be maybe great, I feel like there is such thing as too much of a good thing. Like, would it make ultimates not feel so special if you had too many? You know what I mean? I've always feel like there's a healthy balance. Like, you love something so much, it's natural to want more, but like, you don't want to devalue it at the same time. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think. Alrighty, today I want to tell you a story about... I can't believe I left you alone with your thoughts, I'm sorry.
I want to tell you a story about Final Fantasy XIV. A tale of the raid with one of the most controversial and explosive outcomes in the game's history, the teams that faced up against it, and of kindred spirits standing triumphant.
It's Omega!
Spend everything you have.
Is it, right?
Oh my god!
Oh!
Stormblood was a transformative expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, releasing in 2017 in the wake of Heavensward's roaring success. Much of what Stormblood accomplished solidified the key pillars of the game.
Oh, and Stormblood is when they really ramped up the mechanics, right?
Character and political drama, and a regular weekly content structure, with 3 key endgame difficulties that players could allocate their time into, thanks to the initial introduction of Ultimate in 4.1. And while at the time, it was a fairly divisive expansion, and depending on who you talk to, even today it's considered the shunned child in the family, especially in regards to the main story. There's one department in which I think Stormblood is almost universally praised. The raids were truly peak.
Yeah, like the mechanic design really ramped up. It was something that I definitely noticed when I went through it. Battle! Oh no, they're hot!
The Omega Raid series is by far the MMO's largest amalgamation of Final Fantasy franchise fan service in one single raid. Fan favourite monsters and villains that had been requested almost continuously since launch were crammed into almost every turn. Exdeath, Kefka, Phantom Train and more. Everyone was there. Enemies that were considered so AAA that the only way they'd be included was to one day maybe get a full raid series to themselves.
That is really cool.
And for the most part, that was considered a mere pipe dream. Yet boom, Omega just pops them into existence to test your strength.
Hello.
And more than that, a lot of this raid series is so memorable to people that played at the time because it was so good. The raid tiers were not made up of diamonds in the rough, where only 1 or 2 shining examples stood out. Instead, it was
this boss
banger
looks
after
really
banger
cool.
after banger. Maybe not
With
this
that
guy.
character.
When you look at tier lists or ask raiders about their favourite Savage fights, time and time again, you'll see Stormblood raids mentioned adoringly. Cool mechanics referenced in amongst zealous claims that it was just so good. So when in Endwalker, the Omega Protocol Ultimate was announced to be added to the game in patch 6.3, expectations were through the roof.
So epic.
A minstrel's retelling of one of the game's most beloved raid series, coming out directly after Dragonsong's reprise, one of the most adored capstone moments in FF14's community lore, and the hardest encounter in the game thus far to boot. This new ultimate was positioned to be unforgettable. This race wasn't like the others. This race was different. What was to come was the most controversial race in the game's history.
Really?
With an outcome so hotly disputed that Square Enix...
Okay, so the last complaints were they've added a checkpoint. This has ruined my life. What are the complaints this time? Will not recognise that team as the true world first concerning instances of unfair play. Oh, okay, so it's not complaining about the instance. Okay, what's the controversy then?
Themselves got involved. A raid so difficult that it was claimed afterwards to be so hard that it would not be clearable in a party finder setting without resorting to the use of third-party
Mathematically
tools.
impossible.
This fight will be the first fight in Final Fantasy where third party will be mandatory.
As I'm recording
Really?
this voiceover, this is also the most recent ultimate added to the game. Without another on the horizon for at least another year, it leaves somewhat of a sour taste in the mouths of the FF14 community on the whole. In order to be battle ready for an ultimate encounter,
no.
players have roughly one patch of game time in order to gear up to the current best in slot, meaning that they need to gather weekly capped tomestones as well as clear and farm the most recently released Savage tier for weapons and equipment that are essential to even attempt. For the Omega Protocol, this tier was Abyssos, which was tight enough that many groups struggled to meet it, even without deaths. Traditionally in FF14, having one or two players that were on the weaker side in terms of damage capability was never a huge handicap, as checks were lenient enough to let most competent groups through if they had a clean pull. But certain encounters in Abyssos demanded both. They demanded that you had a clean pull and that all 8 players were performing their rotations at a very high level. Job balance was also just a tiny bit off, and this tight check exacerbated the issue, leading to a handful of jobs becoming flat out undesirable for week 1 progression if you are aiming to clear. The expectation was that top would be a step down from DSR, and a step down from the checks present in Abyssos, in much the same way that Ultima Weapon Ultimate had felt like a small step back from the Unending Coil of Bahamut. DSR had been over 20 minutes long all in all, and required close to perfection.
Yeah, I mean, that is a tough fight to follow, right?
Tight damage checks, back-to-back precise execution mechanics, and
Set the
unforgiving
bar
pacing were rampant.
Omega
it was
high.
considered an impossibility that the newest encounter could be somehow harder. Many World Race groups didn't expect to need more than a week of paid time off work in order to complete progression, and they allocated their time accordingly. Speaking of the teams, let's introduce a few of them now, and as others pop up later on, I'll give you proper breakdowns. Kindred are a world racing group that rose to prominence across Endwalker, consistently being one of the first streaming teams to cross the finish line, which eventually culminated in their stream-first Abyssos clear.
Let's go! Get out of here!
Let's go!
Ooh! Right, the
They were a
name
clear
Bagel
favourite going
Goose
into
is the
Omega
best name
Protocol,
ever.
and they were expected to be one of the places to watch to see new phases and mechanics showcased. Kryle were the group that were the first on Twitch to clear Dragonsong's
This is
reprise,
Arthur's
featuring popular
team.
FF14 streamer Arthur's.
Yeah.
Nice LB, nice LB! Yes, sir!
And they too would be racing this time around. This Japanese-speaking roster were also expected to perform very well, and alongside Kindred, these were the 2 streaming groups with the highest expectations riding on their performances.
I want to cheer them on as well. Like, I've just watched this video. I didn't see the original race. Like, I didn't see it live. But, like, now that I'm seeing and I'm noticing, like, team names and team players, like, I want to root for them too. I'm like, oh my God, it's Kryle. And, like, I don't know, you become a fan and it becomes such a big part of it, doesn't it? Like, you see your favorite teams again and you see your favorite players and it's just like, it's such a spectacle. It's amazing. Oh,
As
I
is true
can't
in
wait
practically
for,
every
like, when I can
online
experience this
group-centric game
current
ever.
and live.
Groups form, disband and remake, with a lot of the same faces shuffling amongst one another. Pairs and trios and partial groups sticking together for years on end, while others come and go. The period between DSR and the Omega Protocol had been tumultuous for thoughts per second, long considered the best group in the world.
Oh,
before they
thoughts
were
per second.
dethroned by
Oh,
Netherlands in
Sphere!
6.1.
So thoughts per second, they were the one who got the world first for the DSR tier, right? I think. But I thought that was Neverland. No, it was Neverland, wasn't it? Okay, Neverland got the world first. So Sphere is in thoughts per second. Okay, I thought the Sphere was in Neverland. T? Yes, I have a T right here. Yes. I'm joking. Oh, yeah, this is Swag in Echo. Right.
Having disbanded as a result, with numerous members stepping back from the game in general or moving on to
It's
new
not a
challenges,
bucket.
the remainders of TPS had reformed with a few new additions, and whilst they and Neverland would not be streaming, both would be competing for that coveted first place finish once more. I don't intend on covering non-streaming groups in too much detail in this video, because I feel like it detracts from the story I'm telling, but there is one more non-stream group that I absolutely need to introduce it. There's a Japanese group that managed to claim world first in Abyssos, and their name was, ironically, unnamed. Remember that name.
That's a good name.
Yeah. And they, alongside countless other dedicated world progression groups, were getting in their final sessions of preparation and counting down the days until January 24th, 2023.
It's like
It
one
was
time I
natural
called
to
my team
practice
Team.
by rerunning the old Omega
I'm so
Savage
edgy.
fights, using them both as a memory refresher of challenges that could be incorporated in the upcoming encounter, and as a good way to stay in practice. But in the weeks leading up to the Omega Protocol's release, when preparatory patch files had been added, something really interesting happened. Certain parts of encounters, best showcased by Final Omega here, just broke. Let's show a side-by-side comparison
What?
versus how it looked after the patch files had been installed and the way the fight had been intended. A number of essential telegraphs and visual indicators just disappeared. What could this mean in relation to Ultimate? With that question swirling around, game time was approaching, and nobody knew quite what Square Enix had in store for them.
Oh.
All that was universally agreed upon was that the final Ultimate of Endwalker would no doubt be a race to remember.
Beep beep. Beep beep. Beep beep. Beep beep. I love this song. Wait. Oh no. I'm gonna hate it. Oh no. Wait, hang on a minute. I did like this song. Beep beep. Beep beep. Beep beep. Beep beep. Is this Ultimate's equivalent of
The Omega Protocol opens to the muted backing music of Deltascape, throwing you immediately into the fray against Omega in its beetle form. This isn't the start anybody was really anticipating. This form of Omega was the boss in 011, as in the penultimate turn
Yeah,
of the
how are we
entire raid
starting
series.
with kind of
Would
the
Omega's
end
summoned creations appear in later phases, or would they not be featuring at all?
boss? That is
They
strange.
made up 10 of 12 fights in the original raid, so it felt a little from left field if they didn't see inclusion in some way. If they weren't featuring, how on earth would Square Enix manage to stretch Omega across an entire Ultimate? There wasn't much time to scratch heads and ponder though, because the moment instances successfully loaded, the very first top pulls begun. Almost immediately, Omega began casting Program Loop, the dreaded mechanic set to plague every single pull for the next 1,000 or more. Towers spawned in seemingly random positions.
1,000
Tethers spewed
pulls?
forth from the boss, and players were marked with first, second, third, or fourth in line on their debuff bar, and all of this was in sets of 2. 2 tethers, 2 towers, and 2 of each number on the list. Everyone also gets a special looper buff. When the tethers go off, they explode for a pretty massive circular AoE around whoever they're attached to, reducing the maximum HP of anyone inside by 99%. To prevent the raid from going boom to a tower, a player with the looper buff needs to soak it, and it'll do a decent chunk of damage to them in the process.
Pro loopers.
These tower and tether pairs happen 4 times, back to back. The resolution of this on paper is very simple. Each player will need to take a tower and a tether at some point in the mechanic, but they need to space out the tower taking and tether grabbing in order for the debuffs and the damage to not overlap and cause what we in the industry like to call a series of unfortunate events. So the 3s would take the first tethers, and the 1s would take the first towers, and they would continue sequentially like that.
Remember, we got first through fourth in line. Take your inline number, that's the tower, add 2 to it, that's your tether.
What made this mechanic such a constant hurdle was also what makes people dislike Phase 1 even in farm to this very day. The mechanic had so much randomization and intrinsic messiness that it just required a lot of focus in every single pull from the very beginning. You needed to remember on every single cycle, if you had a job, what that job was, and then coordinate with the other random player who had the same job as you at the time. If you didn't have a job, you needed to get out of the way without accidentally yoinking a tether or standing in a pulse, which can be harder than it sounds. Healers had to spot heal the right people at the right time, and the people they needed to triage changed every pull. It was one of those mechanics which was just an absolute mess, and it felt like the only initial successes were due to players pulling through by the skin of their teeth thanks to some intense adjusting. In time though, priority systems were developed, and a level of comfort was found. But it wasn't the easy autopilot mechanic that many come to expect from the first minute or so of encounters. It took focus and awareness, and it became quickly tiring when it needed to be played out correctly for 15 plus hours per day.
Wow, yeah, that is a lot.
Speaking of consistency.
So this fight feels very front-loaded.
A souped-up rendition of Omega's pinnacle mechanic.
Wait, we're in
from
phase
its original
1.
iteration in 011.
Wait,
Players
we're in phase
once
1.
again get the funny numbers from the previous mechanic.
But this is so
this
hard!
Time, they'll also get a rocket debuff and a debuff signifying they've been
phase
targeted by a stack. Players would split into groups of 4, dodging the rotating
What is happening right now?
as a party, and ideally surviving the absolute chaos of circular puddles dropping on players. When your rocket debuff timer got low, you needed to get the hell away from everybody else, or bad things would happen. Wait.
Oh!
And otherwise, you needed to stay mostly grouped up in order to survive the 3-man stacks going off at the same time. There were a million ways to solve this, and while some were definitely more effective than others, it was clear that this entire phase, at its core, was all about synergizing your movement with the rest of the party and quickly adjusting to debuffs effectively. From among the 4 running stream groups, almost everyone had slight differences between their strategies, and some chose all-out chaos instead.
I would choose chaos. Wait.
Run.
That'd be me!
Oh shit, I did it.
Healing here was tight. This was at a time before healing ranges were increased, so propagating heal was...
Hold on, that would be me. Going... Look. Sorry!
Oh shit, I did it.
Healing here was tight. This was at a time before healing ranges were increased, so propagating your mitigation
my
and healing
dust.
to the light party on the other side of the room could be tricky, leading to many electing to stack almost every mitigation to avoid accidents. After this came Omega's third and final mechanic. This one, thankfully, was simple. Huge, repetitive tankbuster cleaves splashed on the 2 furthest players, while the remaining 6 get targeted in sets of 3 by random line AoEs. You could solve this by adjusting, and this was what early pro groups did, but fairly quickly, the most lazy strat imaginable was developed.
Stand and let thing resolve.
It was brutal,
What does that
but
mean?
at least it was quick. The entire phase from start to enrage was merely 2 minutes long, but it was quickly discovered that these checks were definitely not the big step back from those present in DSR and Abyssos as
What do you
had
mean
been
stand and let the
expected.
mechanic resolve?
These damage requirements were tight. If you somehow managed to recover a death without the mechanics themselves spelling your doom, you'd fall victim to Omega's atomic ray shortly afterwards, instantly wiping the pull. And because the entire phase before it was so full of randomization in your positioning, a lot of the burden of the success or failure quickly fell to the healers, because they had the most limiting movement in most compositions, and they had to deal with triage. They were by far the most negatively affected by bad patterns or mishaps in terms of damage contribution, and those groups with healers that could quickly adapt were the ones to push closer to transition the fastest. With a limit break 1 dumped that would surely need to be saved later, but keeping that was a problem for the future, one group managed to break the barrier first. BRB Chinese New Year The group featuring comfy streamer Stahl as well as Koya Kaneko from the stream first clear of the Epic of Alexander. This was a static full of faces that were no strangers to the Final Fantasy XIV world prog scene, and they were proving their caliber here, just as they've done in the past, by being the first to pull ahead of the pack and see the transition to Phase 2.
Oh?
Everyone watch out.
Press your bus.
Oh, I love their VTuber model.
Get it!
Wait, was that them? That was the cutest thing I've ever heard. What was that squeak? Oh, so cute. Oh.
In a bold attempt to understand the source of our power, Omega reconfigures into humanoid shapes, taking the form of Omega M and F, and together, they will be your next opponents. Just like in the original Raid series, Omega M and F open up the phase with a defensive firewall, affecting each player with a packet filter. You can only deal damage to the Omega form that you do not have an active packet filter for, in essence splitting the raid in half and preventing you from dealing cleave damage aside from those first few essential GCDs. Once the filter is in place and one terrifying pair of tank busters later, Omega leads into its first major mechanic, one which I feel somewhat sets the pace for this ultimate and acts as both the first real wall and a standout example of why top was said to be truly unique in terms of difficulty: party synergy.
This is a time when Xenos' chat really makes me laugh. The stream's down. F, mini F, the stream. The stream is gone. F. Excuse me, streamer, you're in the middle of progress, but the stream has gone off. It's off now.
My top was said to be truly unique in terms of difficulty: party synergy.
Right, so spread out and try and get a good view.
You see those two females.
Oh my god, what is happening here?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just keep going now.
As soon as the bosses become untargetable, you're bombarded by visual overload. PlayStation markers, tethers connecting players in the party together, the appearance of Omega's eye on the outside of the arena, Omega M, F, and numerous clones, all spawning in tandem. And on top of that, there's party list buffs, and some of the spawned Omegas have unique signature weapons or forms, swords, shields, staves, or scythe legs,
Oh my gosh,
which will correspond
that is so
to
cool.
different shaped arena floor hazards. Let's just say that the cast name of Party Synergy was very apt.
I feel like
because
whenever you
this
see those
mechanic was going to
PlayStation
be a
markers,
trial
it's
and
over
half.
for you.
After
They're a
quickly
bad
avoiding
sign.
the floor hazards,
You should
which
panic
go off
when
just
you
a
see them.
little too quick to be comfortable, you need to find the eye quickly because it's about to beam straight through the middle of the arena, rendering only small sections to its left and right side
What is happening
safe.
here?
If only it was so simple to just scatter to the sides though. From the debuff
We can
list,
scatter.
the party will either have mid-glitch or remote glitch, meaning that they need to be either far away or a medium distance away from their tether partner, the one which shares a PlayStation symbol with them. Because each will explode for a small circular AoE around them on the resolution of this, it was exceptionally tight in terms of positioning, and thanks to the glitch debuffs in place, it was finicky too, and can be very difficult to quickly discern exactly how far or how close you needed to be without a lot of practice. And I mean a lot.
You're right. Now activating mechanic. All of them.
Oh my god, Jesus Christ.
If this were the end of Party Synergy, it would feel fast and punishing but very manageable. But this was only the halfway point. After this, even more clones spawn, and you're once again tasked with deciphering the mess of information. Without a trained eye, it felt impossible to quickly understand and digest. And Omega
There is
F in
so
the middle
much
of the
happening.
room is about to knock back the raid, and you need to fulfill the requirements
Wow!
of mid and far
That
glitch.
movement is so precise. Sorry. You're stacking, getting knocked back, also maintaining the tethers. Do you see this? I'm sure
It
you.
felt
I mean,
impossible.
let me just sprout explain as somebody who's never seen this fight. Let me just talk to all of you who have already seen it. Did you see that?
To quickly understand and digest.
Wow.
And Omega F
That
in
was
the
the
middle of the room is about to
precision.
knock
Look at
back
this,
the
look.
raid,
And
you
they
need to
maintain
fulfill
their
the
tethers
requirements
and
of mid
on
and
their-
far glitch
Oh.
once more, adjusting at random to ensure that the 2 new stack markers are split between both light parties, and that those light parties are in the tiny safe spots, avoiding the, once again, too quick to be comfortable
epic.
AoEs from the new Omega clones.
Wow.
If I went into the priority systems and trial and error the forerunning groups had to go through in order to solve party synergy, I'd be here all day, because this mechanic wasn't merely a wall. It was one of the most difficult mechanics the game had ever seen up until this point.
Nuts.
Everything felt just a little too fast and too precise compared to what came before it, and the only way to consistently get through was to bash your head against it until it became muscle memory. With so many possible permutations and so much information that needed to be quickly distinguished and acted upon, people who couldn't react quickly became immediately apparent. The saving grace was that this occurred so early into the fight that it was quick to get back there after a wipe to keep on practicing.
Wait, this is the start of the fight.
It was at this point
hold
that
up.
the community was realizing just what they'd gotten into.
Wait.
If every phase was as difficult as what had been shown so far, this ultimate was set to be the most difficult ever. A cut above even Dragon Song's Reprise. Everybody was stuck here for a while. Viewers would hop streams to find a good pull, but without fail, for a good solid period of time, even if they came close, one part of the hurdle would trip them, they'd go boom, and then suffer the loading screen back to Phase 1. Kindred and Otternuts were 2 groups here at the forefront, both trading cleaner and cleaner attempts between one another, getting one player through, then a few, until eventually Otternuts managed to sneak through and see the cast of limitless synergy. Not to be easily beaten though, Kindred caught them up merely a dozen minutes later.
Oh fuck.
Wow,
Wild
that's-
Edge.
There's
This looks like a bust.
Sort
Tank
of.
tethers, and yeah, an AoE.
Sagittarius Serum.
The race was on. Otternuts were a group that had been slowly
Otternuts.
rising to prominence across the last handful of races, building their pieces carefully, honing their collective experience, and at last, this was their time to shine. Featuring ex-RuneScape streamer I Trolled You, who was the main POV for them here, Otternuts had finally found their special sauce. As limitless synergy begins, the packet filter in place drops, meaning that both M and F can be freely attacked. Or can they? Almost instantly, Omega F begins channeling her enrage, Laser Shower, with a 1 minute long cast. Slowly but surely, your doom comes. And Omega M jumps to her defense, laying down passage of arms and protecting her from all incoming attacks. If you want to thwart her plans, you're going to need to go through him. More clones take shape around the arena edges, ready to attack. One of the clones will begin to execute a Sagittarius arrow, a mimicry of Bard's Limit Break at a random party member, which must be avoided whilst the 2 tanks need to simultaneously grab, bait, and cool down heavy
fight
tethered
is
telegraphed
nuts.
optimized blade
I thought the
dancers
previous
away from
one
the
was
rest of their
nuts. It's
party.
getting
Should you
worse.
survive this onslaught from 3 of the Omega copies, then follows optimized Meteor, marking 3 random players with flares, which deal heavy damage when they eventually go off. And yet another M clone prepares beyond defense. One by one, the clones mount their assaults, each a heavy limit break level attack by its own right. Beyond defense will have the clone leap on one of the closest players to them at random, then quickly combos it with Pile Pitch, a group stack on the closest target at the time. The person that took the initial beyond defense leap must quickly shuffle out of danger or they'll be insta-killed, and the rest of the party needs to stack in to take their place. Then comes the final part of this foray. A pair of clones will flank Omega F as she continues to prepare Laser Shower, and they will both cast Cosmo Memory. This hit in Savage was absolutely terrifying to behold, and in Ultimate it's no different. Shields and mitigators necessary is an understatement. With all their tricks surpassed, there was nothing left. It was just a pure race against time. What would finish first? Laser Shower? Or the boss's HP bars?
So tense.
And during those first handful of
That's an
attempts
epic
where players
mechanic.
fell or hadn't built up a full understanding of the sequence of events they just slogged through, the only HP bars that ended up empty were the parties. Eventually though, the gap was shortened. While this didn't happen right away, fairly early on, it was deduced that actually, those 3 flares didn't do as much damage as you'd expect by any means. It wasn't just possible to survive them. it was possible to stack them up on the party and take all 3 to the face. That is if you
Wait,
use
no
basic-
way. This is so clever from the devs as well. This is them like really kind of like, oh, you think you need to dodge all the mechanics. Oh, you know what? They're not going to hit that hard. So you can like, because you wouldn't think to do that, would you? It's like another layer of puzzle solving. Like, hang on a minute, this doesn't hit as hard as we expect. Wait, you're supposed to stack them? Like, it's so good seeing the devs kind of like outplay the players in a way like this. It's so fun.
Every single mitigation on top of each other. Because Cosmo Memory
Unless
and
this
Meteors
isn't
going off
meant to be
have
how
less
it was
than 15
intended,
seconds
but
between them overall,
I still, if it
meant
was
you
meant
could
to be
have
as
near enough
intended, that's really
everything
cool.
Cover both hits, reducing the strain of the phase immensely.
Unless you're not supposed
But
to
what
do
was the
it.
real difference maker from the outset was that right at the end of the phase, 2-minute raid buffs become available, meaning that if you got there with everyone alive, you could rely on a huge surge of damage to help you with that final push should you need it. But this was a temporary measure, as it would mean that you then couldn't carry them into whatever came next. There was a risk to using them here in the long term without thought, but in the short term, it gave them the push they needed. Kindred capitalized on a good pull, sent their 2 minutes, and played their very best. And at last, with that, Omega MNF fell, and the group that slayed them got to see Phase 3 for the very first time.
Yes, boys.
Let's go.
You had to use every mitigation possible.
Shield and mid. Yeah, do your single target. Do your single target.
My thing is in 1
Use
second.
attack- Oh, jeez.
Great, so this
Oh
is the
my
first
God.
transition
What's that?
scene now.
Oh,
And emoji.
What the?
Kind of. This was where the stakes began to rise. This is where the race started to get really
Wait,
interesting.
what? Uh-oh. Final analysis. Uh-oh. I am the Alpha. I am
Having
the
been
Omega.
defeated once more, Omega momentarily returns into goop and begins to
Goo!
reconfigure. It concludes that the humanoid forms were maybe not best suited for strength after all, and instead chooses another, more monstrous form. As it begins to take shape, its defense systems whir into action, pulsing AoEs that need to be dodged out from the middle of the room, catching the unaware Kindred off guard. Players are marked with debuffs, signifying they'll be hit shortly by various sniper cannon shots.
Oh
And
no.
they must spread
Get down,
or
get
make
down!
two-man stacks, while dodging the pulsing AoEs and attacks by the armed units that Omega sent out. If somebody accidentally gets clipped, the sniper shots ricochet, blasting other party members with collateral damage, and forcing you to limp into the next phase.
Ooh.
We were here. Phase 3. Final Omega. Well, that's new. Is that supposed to happen?
Wait, what?
Turns out that as Omega reconfigured itself, it forgot to properly bug test before going live because a fairly nasty bug reared its head
Oh
right here.
no.
As a small spoiler, this would not be the last bug that would appear during the race either.
Oh no.
As soon as Omega became targetable, it would instantly auto-attack. And if it happened to hit a healer or DPS with that auto-attack,
Wait, this is a bug in Final Fantasy XIV? Oh, it's a bug. You know what? We have to deal with this all the time in WoW. Hang on a minute. Do you know how many times I've been hit because I'm closest to the boss? This is the norm in WoW, okay? We just have to deal with it. Oh, it's just a bug for us. Oh yeah? We have to deal with this bug all the time. It is a bug in WoW, but it's just so common. Like, there are so many. It is a feature in WoW. It's no longer a bug anymore.
there was a high chance that player would just immediately die because of how much damage it did.
That is the most
This was
annoying bug
clearly
ever,
not
by the way.
design. In Final Fantasy XIV, traditionally, when an aggro reset occurs and a boss becomes targetable, it's pretty standard for the boss to wait around for a couple of seconds before attacking,
It doesn't do that
allowing
in WoW.
proper
It just
aggro
hits
to be
the first thing.
established, so situations like this did not occur. But for some reason, that wasn't the case here. There were even moments where Final Omega would decide it had a grudge against a specific player, spin 180 degrees, and bonk them to death. There were certainly ways
Easy.
around this,
Target
but they were janky
acquired.
and they shouldn't have been necessary in the first place. having the tank position themselves inside the hitbox.
What job do we hate the
directly
most?
in the boss line
Target
of sight
acquired.
as it spawns, and having them spam, tab, and provoke to quickly evoke the boss became standard, as the rest of the party nervously congregated around the back and sides, hoping that everything went smoothly. As an aside, a few days later this bug would be fixed, but not without leaving its mark in Raider Psyche's first. While it made sense that the natural progression after M and F would be to see Final Omega, this certainly felt strange on the whole from a pacing perspective. We were merely 5 minutes into the encounter timer at this point.
This is
and
5 minutes of play. All this is happening in the space of 5 minutes. This is 5 minutes. What? This is all happening in the space of 5 minutes. What? I don't know why I'm laughing, because I'm going to do this fight at some point. So really, I'm just giving myself horrible karma, but...
all 3 Omega forms had shown their
Oh
faces.
no!
What on earth was yet to come in this ultimate? We still had probably 2/3 of its runtime left to go, and it felt unlikely that the summoned trials from earlier Savage turns would feature at this point. Viewers and players alike were excited to surge forward through this phase and see what would happen next. If there's one mechanic that everybody was equal parts excited for and dreading in this phase, it was the inevitable reveal of Hello World. This mechanic in O12S was infamous, combining overwhelming debuff vomit with numerous timers and requiring you to decipher, solve, and adjust. And in the Omega Protocol, it was the very first thing you were hit with. As the Hello World cast ends, each player receives 3 to 5 debuffs, making your buff bar an absolute mess. I'm not going to list every single one of them and what they do here, because a lot of these debuffs have very little effect on what you actually need to do in order to progress. But I'll give you a few tantalizing examples that the first groups had to break down and figure out.
This is nuts.
Critical performance bug, latent synchronization bug, cascade in latent...
Wait, is that why there were bugs in the encounter? Because the boss is a robot and the bugs are part of the fight?
defect, code smells, local regression, you know, nice obvious stuff. You could never accuse Square Enix of being obtuse. In terms of what actually happens, one cycle of Hello World plays out as follows. 2 players get blue rot debuffs and 2 players get red rots. Rot is passed via touch, like some incredibly viral disease, and if you trade it to the wrong person or at the wrong time, it's going to cause a wipe.
Spreading viruses.
You need to trade it to a very specific person and at the right time
very
to allow them to
thematic. I
carry
love
it
it.
as long as they need to, and then move away as on expiration rots detonate a circular AoE around the player that had them. Rots will also have either a shared debuff or a deformation debuff, which is a huge circle AoE when it goes off, so they'll need to either stack with another player or spread away. There will be 2 tethers connecting pairs of non-rot characters together. One of them will be a blue remote tether, and the other will be a green and red multicolored local tether. Blue tether pops when you move too far away from one another, and the green-red tether pops when you move too close. They take a while to activate, so you have a little bit of time to get into position. You will need to pop both of these tethers before they expire, but they do heavy damage and also apply a vuln for a handful of seconds, meaning that you need to space out the tether snaps amongst the other mechanics in the phase in order to survive both the incoming damage and the debuffs. Lastly, there's these 4 huge puddles that you may have noticed, 2 red ones and 2 blue ones, and they must
There's
be
a lot of
soaked
things
by
I've
a rot
noticed.
of the same colour to avoid an instant wipe. So all of these components and debuffs and timers, tethers and rots and stacks, they all come together into a little dance for players to perform. Rots rotate into their puddles, avoiding other players along the way. The 2 people with the blue tether will go between the puddle occupied by the rot colour that has stacks, and green-red tethers will stretch their tether to the outer sides of the deformation-occupied puddles. Once the puddles, stacks and deformations go off, rots will pass to their nearest tether player, and tethers will snap, one after another, ensuring to wait for that uncomfortable vulnerability to drop off and for healing, but as fast as possible besides that. All of this constitutes one single cycle of Hello World. One single cycle of a total of 4. That's right, you have to juggle all of this 4 times in total, in which each player will at some point get to do every possible job.
Great.
If you're having
Love
trouble
that.
remembering all that, Here's a little song that Kindred spectators cooked up to help you remember.
Red is defamation. Red is defamation. Pass rot, pop green, watch the rots. Red is defamation. Towers 2. Pass rot, pop green, watch the rots. This is Towers 3. Red is defamation. Pass rot, pop green, watch the rots. This is the last set. Party is going to blue. Red is defamation. You can pass through each other freely.
What?
Blue, watch the rots.
What? This makes it easier. Oh yeah, this makes it easier. All I'm hearing is. What do you mean?
Party stacked.
The thing about Hello World
yeah,
is
no,
that
I get
once
it now.
it's been
It's fine.
solved,
Nope, got it.
surprisingly, it's actually the most relaxed first half of a phase in the Omega Protocol thus far.
This is
Because you get to
crazy.
practice every responsibility in every pull, a random targeting mechanic becomes one that isn't frustrating to learn. It's quick to get reps on, and consistent once you become comfortable with a specific cycle to do it correctly every time. The main
Right.
challenges were healing, because the arena was so
This looks
absolutely
very
massive and
relaxing. I
individuals were
agree.
spread
Look how
far and
relaxing
wide.
this is.
Propagating shields and mitigation could be tough. The regularly used solution here was to let the healers inch deeper inside the boss hitbox in order to cast their essential triage. But this meant, if they had rot, they were another dangerous hazard to avoid. Speaking of main challenges, rots. If there's something that makes people just compulsively need to stand on top of each other in FF14, it's when they have a debuff that prevents them from doing so. Accidental rot trading caused a lot of wipes here for early progression groups.
Oh, because you're
while they
dodging
worked
all
out
the
kinks
chaos, and then you also
figured
have to
out
look at where
stable,
everyone else is.
consistent traffic rules. Soon enough, a clean 4 cycles was successfully carried out. As the groups crept through Hello World in one piece, they were quickly met by Iron of Flux, a heavy raid wide, which would follow into the second major mechanical onslaught of the phase. One interesting
Sludgy
thing of note, though,
tentacles.
was that there were leftover debuffs, debuggers still affecting each player, and they had not dropped. It was clear that they weren't needed yet, but would they be utilised in some way a little later down the road? Usually once a mechanic is fully resolved, the debuffs relating to that mechanic will drop or expire, but in this case they just hadn't. It was food for thought, at least. So it's time we take a little break from progression to talk about another issue a few groups were becoming aware they were having. Kirana's Tivoli, a long-standing European staple in the world prog scene, were the ones to initially bring attention to it. The core of this group existed and have been solidly playing together since all the way back in Heavensward. And they were also streaming, because I was in the group streaming the race.
I was going to
Let's
say,
watch
isn't
this
this
clip. Do you
Rinon? Isn't this who made this video?
notice anything funny? That's right, those are the buffs from abilities and raid buffs missing on a player in the party. They have a 100% chance to hit, and this should absolutely never happen with no exceptions whatsoever. Except there is an exception. Final Fantasy XIV has a maximum number of buffs or debuffs that any player, NPC, or enemy can have active on them at any given time. You'll never hit
no,
that in
I know
general
where this
purpose
is going.
gameplay, because how would you? But there were specific instances with large-scale player counts where especially boss buff caps could happen in the past, the most egregious of which being Delubrum Reginate and its Savage version. Well, thanks to all those little bugs Omega infected everyone with, in party comps that used a very heavy raid buff stack, or even healing jobs like Sage which applied a number of buffs in their healing and mitigation, it was possible to hit that cap. And while in the past it could be an annoyance, here, in content with tightly tuned DPS and mitigation checks, losing your Riddle of Fire, or your Astro cards, or your bloody shields could be a death sentence. This caused a number of
This
job
is
changes amongst some of
bad.
the groups that were deep into P3, as they didn't want to deal with the frustration of having their fate out of their own control.
Yeah, because
Okay,
you
back
wouldn't.
to prog. Next came monitors, another mechanic that
You
was
wouldn't gain
present
your
in
buff,
Savage.
'cause you
In
had too many.
O12S, the boss will point its hands
Yeah,
in.
but did they think about just right-clicking the buff or debuff off? Like, just click it off. What's the issue? That's how you deal with debuffs. Just click them off.
The direction, visually displaying monitors, and the tanks need to soak the hits as it targets 2 players in its cone of vision. Interestingly, this was one of the mechanics affected by the visual bug that we saw before proc. In top, that concept is the same. Omega is still cleaving half of the room, and 2 players still need to soak it to survive.
Visually,
But 3
this is
random people are
captivating.
also affected with monitors of their own. And
Like,
those
look at
3
this.
guys have each got to hit 2 and only 2 people with their monitors, because if you get hit twice, you die. Like almost everything else in this fight, when the monitors went off, you needed to be spaced out as you'd be hit for an AoE around yourself. This led to some tight positioning requirements, the ability to quickly adjust and good control of your angling if you're a monitor yourself. It didn't help, but for many, 2-minute raid buffs were up here, and because your monitor would aim based on your facing, you had to be very, very careful. And after this, unceremoniously, Final Omega led straight into its Enrage cast.
Okay.
That was lucky.
That was very, very lucky.
That's fucking. I don't even have time to pass this.
Said every back mage
that's-
ever.
It turned out that those 2 minutes I mentioned at the end of the previous phase were about to become very relevant, because in order to meet the check here, you either needed to carry those buffs over to this part of the encounter, giving you 2 uses to chunk Final Omega, or you needed to burn a DPS limit break 3. Without one of these being fulfilled, this early into release, it was practically impossible to pass. And so, once more came the execution war. Top was tight. Everybody needed to be on point, clean, and execute their rotations optimally. I've mentioned it before, but I just want to stress that this Ultimate's DPS check was just far beyond anything before it. It wasn't insurmountable, but it certainly pushed groups to find those GCDs of optimization where they could, those tight positionals, and cut back on those overheals. And Kindred pushed through the barrier first, cutting short Final Omega's Enrage cast.
This is crazy.
Finish it. Let's go.
I got Swift. I get him.
Kill him.
DPS.
Just DPS, just DPS.
Yeah, this is easy. This is free.
Block, Fred.
Yeah, go ahead and spread and animate that we still have.
Maybe.
This is really close.
Oh, come on.
They
Oh,
did
come
it.
on. Wait, is this it? Oh my
Wait,
gosh.
this is it. They did it.
Initiating system shutdown. This is the first time we've seen this live.
Oh,
You were here,
he's
chat.
back.
Oh my gosh.
Can we get audio
okay, so
on this?
Pause.
Resurrects. Defeat unacceptable.
Oh, stack
some light
stack
party
lines,
set.
light
Laser
parties.
stack.
Whoa!
Oh.
Look at it!
As its body crumbles beneath it at the end of Phase 3 from your battle, its systems beginning to initiate shutdown, Omega
This is
refuses
mean,
to
I
accept
agree.
this as the outcome of its testing. It couldn't just fall like this. That was unacceptable. This is where the
Unacceptable.
Omega Protocol deviates from the plotline of the source material, with Omega rebooting, removing its inhibitors, and continuing the fight against you, regardless of its structural integrity. The phase begins mere seconds after the previous ends, and both in mechanical complexity and in length, this is the shortest and most simple in the entirety of this fight.
Oh yeah, this
As
looks
from
simple,
the
yeah.
heavens blasts in the background, reaching its crescendo, wave cannons shoot from the boss, thick line AoEs that target each player, requiring them to spread. As these go off, 2 random players will get line stack markers, and they'll need to stack together in spots that no player initially occupied.
This fight
because
has
the wave cannons
like
will shoot a second
precision
time at
point
the same positions where they
positioning
initially struck.
the entire way
pulsing
through so
circular
far.
AoE originating from Omega
Like,
that players saw in the transition to Phase
like
3
pixel
reoccurs here, instantly killing anyone
perfect.
that's caught within it. This mechanical combination happens 3 times in a row, with shifting timings of dodging the pulsing circles and wave cannons, and each individual hit deals high damage to players. Because everyone is spread, shields need to be carefully applied as players come together for the 2 stacks, and then enough defensives needs to be given to them as they spread once more to set them up to take the next incoming hit. Once you survive the 3 sets, dodging into the wave repeater's pulse, Omega casts blue screen, wiping the raid. Reset. The first groups sped through this phase, taking only a handful of pulls to reach blue screen. The epic nature and fast pace, combined with the music, felt like a culmination of
Who is
everything
playing
that-
Black Mage on this fight? Who is playing Black Mage? I just want to talk. Like, hang on a minute. What? in a fight with this much movement and craziness and pixel perfect positioning. Who is playing Black Mage? Oh my gosh, that is so skillful. My word. Wow, I'm just like, I mean, I'm blown away by everyone who's competing in Race the World First Ultimates, but still, I feel like Black Mage, because of how punishing it is and how like difficult it is to optimize while progressing a crazy fight like this, I'm just like, whoa.
Come so far, and it definitely got the adrenaline pumping, but despite the speedy prog, no one even came close to passing through the phase. For most, the boss was still sitting at 30 to 40% HP when enraged. Even when the party got there fairly cleanly, it was too tight. It felt impossible to chunk off so much additional HP. Something was wrong. It was at this point.
Wait, we're watching the
community
Black
began to
Mage.
discuss,
This is the Black Mage,
was this
right?
the puzzle
No?
mechanic
maybe
of the
not.
Omega Protocol? Was there some additional necessary mechanic to prevent a failure state? In
Wait, hold on.
past
I was
the
fixating on the
community
Black
put
Mage.
so
Sorry, let
much
me go back a little bit.
additional HP. Something was wrong. It was at this point that the community began to discuss. Was this the puzzle mechanic of the Omega Protocol? Was there some additional necessary mechanic to prevent a failure state? In past Ultimates, some form of puzzle mechanic at some point was fairly standard. In UCOP, you had to push Bahamut below a certain threshold to avoid his damage up in final phase. Uwu had 3 entire Primal Awakenings to deal with, T had the Enigma Codex, and DSR had a rewind and the requirement to not kill Thordan late in the fight. It was only natural that Top had one too, and because this felt like such an insurmountable wall, it made sense that this would be it. A tank LB was attempted to mitigate blue screen. No dice.
We summoned the
At this point, Neverland, the group that hadn't been streaming, but had been tracking
are
their
FF
progress
logs?
via the FF Logs competition page, reached Phase 5, promptly vanishing from the race page within moments as they did.
Wait, what?
5. Hand screen. No dice. At this point, Neverland, the group that hadn't been streaming, but had been tracking their progress via the FF Logs competition page, reached Phase 5, promptly vanishing from the race page within moments as they did.
It's exciting though.
This happens in WoW, where that tracking is turned off and the access to logs is not allowed, and it's usually when a team will go dark. Liquid do that fairly often. And they'll turn, you know, the Warcraft logs tracking off and everything. Interesting. I wonder why. Because I don't think you would be able to see anything anyway, right?
No. We now have confirmation that Neverland is in Phase 5.
They'd clearly
Wonder
figured
why
out
they would
something
turn
that
it
the
off.
others hadn't quite yet. They'd been stuck on blue screen for no less than 20 hours, according to the page.
20
so the solution
hours?
couldn't be simple. It was time to think.
So I know you can
Theories were
figure
abound
out.
from
So you with logs anyway, with World of Warcraft logs, you have to gain access to the logs, like they're private logs. Like you have to physically be granted access to have them, and even when a team goes dark, they still log. It's just your progress isn't tracked. So like they're still logging, so they still need the powerful analytical tool through logging to work out, you know, stuff, but nobody else can see like what your best pull is, or there are certain things that can't be tracked. But I don't know how they work in Final Fantasy logs. Like I assume it's the same thing. You can't just go into another team's logs and see exactly what they've done. If you can do that, it makes sense to turn the logs off, but usually it's so that people can't track where you are, what stage of the fight you are. You can see the best pull and group comp. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, then you don't really want to give away anything. Happens sometimes. I mean, Liquid do it. I think Echo did it once. And then I think they got flamed and there was outrage. But then I think after that, Liquid have done it like multiple times now. It just happens. It's part of competition, right? You don't want your competition to see what progress you've made or what you've found out or what you've discovered.
Competitor and viewer alike. If you tried to complete Phase 4 without hitting Omega, preventing further damage to it, would that prevent that final desperate cast of blue screen? No, it was impossible that Healer LB could have any positive effects. Eliminated. What about those buffs we talked about earlier? The debuggers that didn't cleanse after finishing Hello World. They stayed on the players throughout Phase 4 too, and while they seemingly didn't have any effect in combat, they could be important. Considering that a blue screen was often the byproduct of a bug, and the buffs you were carrying over into Phase 4 were debuggers, it certainly stood to reason that one potential option was to carry over a certain number of those buffs. Maybe then players could survive blue screen. But actually doing that would be a strategic nightmare. Not only would you need to completely redevelop a new Hello World solution, the complexity of which would drastically increase to the point of being nigh impossible. If you somehow made it through that, you'd need to deal with somehow solving leftover deformations during monitors. Not happening. That wouldn't work either. Some groups sat back and pondered, but most focused on what they could do. The best pulls were reaching around 31% on the HP bar by Kindred, but if LB3 was saved for Phase 4, which could be done with a clean and confident Phase 3, that should get lower. That could chunk off a decent amount. And regardless, even if they couldn't solve the phase right now, they could build consistency to be in a good position going forward. So the pulls kept going. This wall stood, and more groups caught up. Practically all of the forerunning groups at this point were pushing against the phase, chaining pulls, theorizing, or both. The charity stream for the World Race was holding whiteboard sessions between the commentators, discussing possible solutions and tinfoil hat theories. Promising pulls were traded between pretty much all the groups I've mentioned by name at this point.
Slow dodge, very slow. Calm.
Back and forth, closer and closer, chipping percentages here and there, but Omega still stood, and it wasn't even close either. Even getting to this point was an insane consistency check. It was tough to chain pulls here without slumps in between. And then, with the whole FF14 raiding world watching, Otternuts pulled this out the bag.
Wait, move in. Alright, pump everything you got here. Everything you got here. Under
19, 19, 19, 19, 19, 19, 19 angle, 19 angle,
19,
19 angle,
19?
19 angle.
Yes!
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 Let's
fucking
go!
Wait, what? What happened?
Spread.
Oh my
god! I got female.
So it wasn't a puzzle at all. It was a check. The debuffs were a red herring. It was a check that required you to bring a huge damage vamp, like melee LB3 or 2-minute raid buffs, as well as stockpiled gauge through, which necessitated great execution in everything that had come before. Instead of reducing the HP to 0, you just needed to bring Omega past that magic 20% threshold, which would reduce the potency of its blue screen.
See, there is such a thing sometimes as overthinking it, and because like there's so much puzzle solving and there are all these elements, like it throws you off. So sometimes the devs are like countering that by just having, oh no, there's no puzzle, you just need to DPS it down. But like you don't know that, so it's like, you know, it's so good.
Mitigation. And as the dust settles, both you and Omega, having reverted back to its MNF form, take a moment to catch your breaths, completely and utterly awestruck. Glowing resplendently gold, Omega has been pushed to its very limits and beyond, and has emerged out the other side, changed. It could only be one thing. Dynamis.
I must evolve beyond current parameters. Oh, okay. Wait, they're golden? Unknown augmentation.
A whole new world has opened up to Omega. This was the power the Warrior of Light had used to defeat it, and what a power it was. But how far could it go? Where was the limit? And could Omega implement this new knowledge into its battle portfolio? More testing would be needed. Phase 5 opens with F warping away and the newly gold-clad Omega M instantly launching a tank swap required 2-hit buster before casting Run Dynamis Delta, an insanely hard-hitting raid damage before the boss leaves, and the familiar components of a trio fill out field of views. Every ultimate at some point has factored in trio mechanics, named after their inception in UCOB, when Bahamut, Twintania, and Nail would come together to attack you, with intense mechanical combinations of each of their signature abilities. Usually, you'll get multiple trio mechanics in a single phase, with the boss leaving its HP in the mid-80th percentile before this.
This is what, phase 5? Oh yeah, but you have to do everything else before it. There's no checkpoint yet. Like, we're saying, oh, you know, you just get to this point. Oh, you just get to here. Phase 5, and you have to do all of this intense stuff before, like every single wipe, you have to start again from the beginning and go through all of that again. Like, it's crazy. It's so easy to just get carried away of like, okay, we're at the next point, but you forget, like, you have to go through the whole fight again. This is nuts.
And Delta taking its namesakes from one of 3 raid tiers in Stormblood, it was clear that this would not be standalone. Just as a disclaimer before we talk about Dynamis Delta, this is a complex sequence of events, and I'm not going to go through every single detail because I feel we'll miss the forest for the trees. But what I do want to do is put you in the position that prog groups were in when they tried to solve this. Beetle Omega spawns on one side of the room, Final Omega on the other, and the Eye on the outside of the arena. And shortly afterwards, fists will spawn a few feet behind each player, color-coded either yellow or blue. These fists are an advanced iteration of the ones from O11S. In the original, the fists will punch the floor where their targeted player is, and in order to destroy them, you must make 2 punch one another. If you do it too slowly, they enrage and wipe the raid. The exact same is true here, except you only get 1 attempt instead of 3, and 1 fist of each colour need to hit one another. 4 players are chained in pairs with the code smell of the blue tether, and another 4 in pairs with the green-red tether code smell. This means that during the mechanic, 4 tether snaps need to take place throughout, while fulfilling the spacing requirements
Oh my god,
until
this
that
is
point
crazy.
comes. There are 2 new debuffs as well, Hello Near World and Hello Far World, which will become important later. As the fists go off, arm cannons spawn around into cardinals and north-south of the arena. 6 of them, and you need to put a player close to each one to aim them outside as they spin, shooting beams towards the closest target. But having your players bait them means that somewhere a tether is going to snap, and you need to pre-position your players for their fist mechanics as the Eye is beaming the middle of the arena at this time, and if you don't, it's impossible to get to the arms in time. Strat reshuffle. You get through this, you do the fists, snap the first tethers and bait the arms, but then Omega M jumps on a guy, ping-ponging him and instantly wiping you. It seems like it's the same pile pitch jump that he did in Phase 2, in which he randomly selects one of the closest targets to attack. He spawned in the middle of the arena as the previous mechanics resolved, so you needed 2 people in the middle to bait, and then at least a few people to take the stack afterwards. But there are additional challenges going off at the same time too. Omega is telegraphing a monitor attack on a random side of the arena, and he's also just thrown a monitor on a player too. So now 4 players need to soak those monitor attacks, and of course, they go off at the same time as the pile pitch stack. Another strat reshuffle from the ground up to factor in this new information. This was how blind trio prog traditionally went. You'd build a semi-working concept based off your current information, push it to its limits, and then try to burn your invulnerabilities or res cheeses to see as many seconds as you can, gaining precious information.
Because then you have to start again, so you see like seconds at a time.
You'd make a new one, factoring in the knowledge you'd acquired. Run Dynamis Delta was multi-layered and complicated, and it felt never-ending, with so many moving parts to consider all at once and to cleanly execute with constantly changing strategies. It was a mess to gain any ground in. By now, over 20 groups had made it to this point, yet not one of them had gotten through. Prog was slow. You could take an entire lockout to see one minor new piece of information if you were lucky. Meaningful progress dried up on all fronts, and it became a battle against dropping morale and fatigue more than anything else. Groups were trying different approaches. As an example, some players were using 4 people to bait the 6 arm cannons, easing the numbers issue but upping the complexity majorly, while most were using 6 players to achieve the same results. But in the grand scheme of things, nobody was surging ahead here. Most of these individual components targeted with complete randomness as well.
How does anyone solve
this?
It was
an absolute nightmare to get through consistently. Minutes turned to hours. Groups slept, woke, and continued bashing their heads against a multitude of problems. Once you got through everything beforehand, Beetle Omega would telegraph an angled half-arena cleave, and something entirely new and terrifying would happen. The Hello World buffs would hop. New telegraphs never seen before of little jumping circle AoEs spewed from them, seemingly at random, and if a player was hit twice, or if anyone was caught in the initial, larger AoEs from the Hello Worlds, everybody exploded. But that wasn't the most interesting thing. When Dynamis hopped, it left the player with a stack of quickening Dynamites, with no duration nor lost state, even on death. Now we're talking. The first stacks of quickening Dynamis obtained on stream were a revelation. Everybody went wild. It was clear that you'd need to collect these throughout the phase, potentially on one player, or maybe spread the stacks evenly amongst the party. It was also eventually solved that the Hello Near World would hop to the 2 closest players, and the Hello Far World would jump on the 2 furthest players, and you needed to fulfill these strict positioning requirements while the Omega Cleave went off, and at the same time dealing with any leftover tethers. If you did it all correctly, you'd come out with 6 players possessing 1 stack of Quickening Dynamis, though you couldn't with 100% control dictate who those players would be. These Dynamis stacks were to be the signature mechanic of Phase 5, and building them up over time evenly amongst the party would be of the utmost importance. There were so many moving parts in this mechanic that it was overwhelming. With that said, it was actually pretty elegant in how it all played out, and satisfying to do as well. Getting through this part of the phase alone took multiple 16-hour prog days, with the fastest groups needing around 250 pulls from first seeing Phase 5 to cleanly passing Run Dynamis Delta, but Otternuts eventually broke through, seeing the boss respawn and immediately phase into another crushing tank buster. Before I move on though, I want to talk about something that happened early in Phase 5 progression, because it was both shocking and pretty interesting. Before groups had seen most of this for themselves, in-game, the following video leaked on Bilibili. It dictates practically the entirety of Run Dynamis Delta, not being done correctly, but being showcased by a solo player using some form of God mode to avoid death. As a note, even using some kind of private server against terms of service would never be able to replicate these kinds of results. This was the entire mechanic, with all of its assets, animations, and practical effects working as intended. This was no small task to fate or put together externally. It had to be an internal leak, much like the internal leak before the Dragon Songs Reprise War race.
Surely not. Why? Oh no. It must have been an accident. Surely. Like, come on. You all spend so long creating this amazing fight just to have this leak. Oh, come on.
Which led to both the loss of jobs and legal action being taken.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Like, that makes me really upset. Like, having this whole thing just leaked, like all the mechanics kind of showcased like this and a solve, and yeah, no, why would you leak that?
The fact that this happened twice in a row during Ultimate World Races was utterly
twice,
bizarre.
There was a
as the next
screenshot
major
as well.
cast approached, the pull timer at this point was finally ticking over the 10-minute mark. Ultimates were usually somewhere in the 16 to 19-minute region, which meant we were well and truly in the second half of this battle. Another Run Dynamis activates, this time Sigma, as boss HP ticked to around the 60% mark. Once again becoming untargetable, the Omega Squad rolls in to set up for their next attack. PlayStation symbols reappear from Phase 2. 2 arm cannons spawn in the room and snap their aim to the 2 furthest players, ready to attack. Omega M leaps to the outside of the arena, Final Omega to the direct center, and Beetle Omega opposite its humanoid counterpart. On the buff front, the mid and far glitch buffs appear once more, as do Hello Near World and Hello Far World. Red markers appear on heads, Final Omega cleaves each person with one of them, and then you likely wipe. Because iconography within an encounter often works the exact same way when it reoccurs, almost all of this we instantly solve. Mid and far glitch, which does its first of what is assumed to be 2 resolutions, goes off right as Omega does these big cleaves at everyone. We know the PlayStation markers will be tethered together, and that in order to avoid going boom to the wave cannons from Final Omega, the raid must spread around it, with the PlayStation simultaneously solving the distance requirement. The last component is those arm cannons. They target the furthest person to them with a beam of their own, and conveniently, exactly 2 individuals do not have a floating red prey marker above their head. The difficulty here is that, like with almost every challenge in top, players are randomly assigned for each responsibility. This resulted in conga lines and quick adjustments being used to get into those necessary spots fast. After this, everyone will get the looper buff from Phase 1 once more, and towers will spawn in one of 2 configurations. Omega F spawns, does a knockback from the center of the room, and the second resolution of the mid-far glitch occurs. This happens a mere handful of seconds after the last set of mechanics resolve, and because mid and far glitch went off at the same time, you couldn't just throw bodies and fill each tower and be fine. you needed to set the entire party up in very specific configurations to fulfill the active glitch, each tower being filled, and the fun little twist that I didn't mention yet. Some towers needed one person inside, and some two, telegraphed by the number of spinning little orbs on the outer edge of the tower. This was a real tough cookie to crack. Pulls bled into hours, bled into lockouts.
Oh, I see it, yeah.
The goal for
orb,
a full day of prog would be to even come close to overcoming this wall. Some even leapt into the comforting embrace of coil turn 4 to simulate the knockback configurations, valuing building some semblance of muscle memory over continuing to pull. Others kept their focus firmly inside the instance, making efforts to see Sigma as many times as possible. Autonuts and Kindred were the two groups trading blows throughout Phase 5 until this point, neck and neck, a battle of minds, two groups and their support players inching along, trying their utmost to refine their strategy and make the magic play that would get them through. Autonuts managed it first, yet again.
This is new best pull. We're gonna see more mechanics.
Oh my gosh!
We're gonna see more mechanics. Okay, we got the big wings in the middle. It's gonna be a spin. Pantocrator maybe. We got hands on the outside for lasers. Big eye laser through the middle. Gotta dodge that one. And outside of that, oh, it spins.
Ooh,
it spins. You gotta dodge. And then there's the
that is-
slashes in between. And of course the Dynamis debuffs. Let's go off. Beautiful Living Dead popped here by Death Snail just to stay alive. Then the hand lasers come in and Omega F spawns. Oh my god.
The ninjas running around. No.
The end of Sigma Trio had been reached, but despite seeing the finale of this multi-stage nightmare of a trio, there was still an entire section to learn and clean up. Luckily, this part was the easiest by far. The rings around Final Omega appear in the middle of the room, and after a while they shoot a massive rotating line AoE, killing anyone caught within. Omega F uses her weapon telegraphed AoEs from Phase 2 in tandem with this, and two more arm cannons spawn. Hello Nearworld and Hello Farworld at long last go off here, meaning you need to position your party.
At this point, I'm like, goodbye world. I jump off the edge
and avoid all the hazards at the same time. This was fairly simple, and there were a number of different ways to do this, so this final part posed no real long-term threat. With that, 12 Dynamis stacks were obtained, albeit somewhat unevenly. This is where the second major auto-attack bug that plagued groups during progression popped up. It certainly wasn't as bad as the one in Phase 3, but because it occurred so late, directly after so many difficult trials, it was way more frustrating to experience. When you took a hop of one of the Dynamis buffs, you got a vulnerability up for a few seconds. This was clearly intended to prevent a player being cheeky and intentionally baiting multiple stacks on themselves, but it came with an unfortunate side effect.
That's a really cool visual,
if the
that
tank with
arrow.
aggro took one of the final hops from either Near or Far World, there was a chance. Yes, this wasn't completely consistent by any means, for the first auto attack from Omega F to hit them before the vulner fully dropped, instantly killing them. It could be mitigated by forcing a tank swap if this were to happen, or forcibly adjusting your setup to ensure the tank would never take the final hop. Kirana's Tivoli publicised this, with Xeno bringing a higher level of attention to it by making a video when it happened to him during Prog 2.
Are there two different
This caused some
Rinons? Hang on. Isn't the guy we're watching called Rinon now? Or Rinin? Am I being stupid? Wait, is it not the same person, Rinon Banana, as this Rinon? Oh, it's the same person. Okay, so he's sharing his own tweet. Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought he was sharing someone else's tweet. I don't know why I thought that. But there are two Rinons, aren't there? There's also Rinon is this guy and there's also Rin. Okay, I just got confused for a second because I knew there were two. So I was like, is this the other one, Rinon Banana? I just got thrown for a second.
Of attention to it by making a video when it happened to him during Prog 2. This caused some disagreement between different groups, as some claimed that it was clearly intended, and that those that had the bug occur to them were just not playing around an intended mechanic.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, when this bug, this bug very much exists in WoW several times, it doesn't get fixed, so you just play around it. So there's certain mobs and there's certain bosses and there's certain phase transitions where you just stay away from the boss because, like, that it just stays that way the whole time. So it becomes a mechanic, even though it's a bug. It becomes a mechanic. You're just like, don't go near the boss, don't go near the boss, let the tank be the closest person and stuff like that. Like, it's happened so many times. Yeah, skill issue. Wait, let me read I love how server tick in Final Fantasy XIV usually just means thing that didn't behave the way I expected that I don't understand. Feving.
And that those that had the bug occur to them were just not playing around an intended mechanic. While there was no conclusion reached during the race, Square Enix put a stop to any conflicting opinions a few weeks later by confirming it was a bug, patching it out of the game,
usually it is,
permanently solving the last massive Omega Protocol glitch. Just like before Delta and Sigma, a tank buster and raid damage combination follows this, and that means that yes, there's going to be another Run Dynamis mechanic right afterwards. Interestingly though, as Run Dynamis Omega's cast bar ends, the boss does not leave and continues to auto-attack. Not only that, but a 2-minute burst phase comes up here too, meaning groups will need to deal with what comes next whilst not only maintaining their rotations, but while doing reopeners and moving the boss around.
See, look at this movement is crazy. So even though I'm saying this bug exists in WoW and we just deal with it, that's like, I'm not being passive aggressive or anything. I'm just saying like, oh, I understand this bug because I've experienced it before. But like the thing is that you can't just play around it in this situation because the movement is so precise and there are so many things going on. There are so many mechanics. It's not a case of, oh, just don't be the closest person to the boss, because there are so many things you're doing at the same time. So, you know, a bug like that in a situation and an environment like this is like really bad. It's not a case of like, you don't have the luxury to just not be the closest person to the boss, for example, or whatever. Because also, as you guys are saying, a death is so detrimental. Like, you cannot afford to lose anyone. Arguably, that can be said in WoW as well. But like, no, especially in an ultimate fight where you're like, what, 15 minutes into the fight, 10 minutes into the fight at this point? Like, it is just nuts.
And another 2 will get Hello Distant World. These have different timers, which will also be represented by an accompanying first in line or second in line. Final Omega will spawn in the center of the room and begin casting Diffuse Wave Cannon, a large cone AoE that hits 2 opposite cardinal directions. It does this twice in succession, alternating the safe spots with a kit. At the same time,
controversial because usually you don't have bugs.
Clones will spawn on the intercardinals, once more sporting their various weapons from Phase 2. They'll execute in sets of 2 at the same time as the cleaves go off.
Why is it controversial?
So you'll dodge 3 combined attacks, then dodge 3 more. This mechanic was simple to understand, but thanks to the overwhelming amount of visual stimulus in such a short space of time and the speed with which it went off, it could be really difficult to instantly figure out the safe spots. Luckily, this was easy to practice, because by this point an LB3 was available. The majority opted to tank LB or hyper mitigate for the sake of prog, allowing them to be hit here and still survive to see what came next. Then, Omega F becomes untargetable, and Final Omega in the center of the stage telegraphs monitors for a 3rd time. You then need to solve Hello Near and Hello Far World, as well as the requirements of monitors at the same time. If you make it through that, Beetle Omega spawns on the edge, extending 2 blaster tethers, and the other Near and Far World would reach 0 and go off. By this point, it was fairly easy to deduce what the true goal of Quickening Dynamis was, with 4 total sets of debuffs appearing, each providing 6 stacks that gave you a total of 24, and dividing that by 8 was 3 per player, a pretty standard and comfortable number to have. This quickly became the de facto goal. Because you couldn't dictate exactly which players had a specific number of stacks going into the start of Run Dynamis Omega, it meant that quick, on-the-fly organization needed to take place during those earlier dodges. In order to avoid mix-ups or communication mishaps, most solve this by having 1 or 2 players take responsibility for checking the debuffs and selecting who would go where, either via callouts or manually marking. Once this system was implemented, it quickly became by far the fastest trio to prog through and the easiest to gain consistency on. At last, Raiders were able to catch a break. As the Forerunners were getting close to this point, prog had reached and surpassed the 1 week mark. The amount of time that Dragon Song's Reprise World First had required came and went without incident, proving the insane difficulty that Top posed. Putting a phase with such a massive
WoW players think it's bad when we're on one boss for 3 days.
Felt like a sadistic choice, because the sheer time investment required to attempt them was utterly daunting. This was what really set the Omega Protocol apart. Phase 5 was the toughest ultimate phase to progress in Final Fantasy XIV history, and it was claiming its victims one by one. Generally, FF14 avoids backloading encounters too much in order to keep them palatable, but here, the hardest really was in the heart of the third act. Groups were starting to run out of paid time off, some becoming overwhelmed by the mental slog this race had been, and others were hitting the point of frustration where disagreements...
Because we have to remember this isn't necessarily like a job at this point, because what a lot of people don't realize is like world first raiders in the WoW scene, at least in the top like competing race world first guilds, it's actually like a job at that point. Even though some of the race world first guilds can only take so much time off, right? Because the race world first is every so often, like what, 1 maybe 2 a year. You have to have a job outside that as well. So like whatever. But with this, it's a hobby, right? Because there's no like big show. I don't know how much money there is in the race to world first as like a spectacle. It's mostly all of these players playing for fun and streaming their progress. So it's not they're not getting paid to do this. There isn't this big monetary gain. So yeah, you'd be taking time off of work. You're just playing for fun. So if a fight is going to go on for over a week, there's only so much time you can take off, especially in different countries, right? Where sometimes getting time off is really hard compared to others, and you might not have holiday or whatever. This is, I mean, yeah, obviously the individual streamers who stream will make money from subs and stuff like that. But I mean, like in terms of a paid job, like in the Race to World First scene, like it's a paid event, you know, like it's a big money earner for those esports orgs. But like that's because the event is so big now. Whereas this is like just community, fun driven while also making money, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's not like you can take some time off of your job and be able to pay bills because you can reliably have an income for that time. Yeah, that is a long time on one fight. Like I said, we stress or panic when we have like 3 days on one fight. Like that's kind of unheard of. But can you imagine doing the same fight over and over again for like, what, 20 hours, 16-hour days for a week? Oh, yeah, it's mostly for charity. Yeah, I've seen that. But I like, as somebody who is very much involved in like the Race to World First, I want that for Final Fantasy. Like the spectacle that it is in WoW, I don't know. It just needs to come to Final Fantasy, because look at the spectacle. Look at this incredible content. It needs that same visualness, I suppose, that same visibility as I would say the Race to World First in World of Warcraft. Like, because this is just absolutely mind-blowing.
Began to break out. One by one, they fell. The herd thinned. And amongst them was Otternuts. Despite having pulled ahead of the pack and proven their caliber as one of the top 2 streaming teams in the race thus far, their available time to dedicate to 16-hour days was over.
Aww.
For them, it would be evenings only from this point forward, removing them from contention entirely. It was crushing, but these are the realities of hardcore ultimate progression in the current landscape of intense difficulty. 1 week is often just not enough. Then, it happens. Just over a week after release, a reported clear came in. What first? Somebody did it. Not only did they do it, they must have been a country mile ahead of everybody else.
That's
because
insane.
Nobody on stream had even made it to the final stretch.
How?
It was unnamed. The Japanese group that I said would be important almost an hour ago, right at the start of the video, were the first static in the world to become alpha legends.
They must
Other
have been
racers
so
and
far ahead of
spectators alike
everyone.
flocked to congratulate them, well aware of what a huge achievement this was. It was a great moment for the Final Fantasy XIV community, and there was nothing that could spoil this wonderful scene. Oh no.
Wait, what?
Just as
This doesn't look right. This looks weird.
a little aside, this was originally posted on YouTube, but it's long gone. This is a mirror. The original was uploaded to a YouTube account with a rough translation to Divine Punishment, or Retribution, and includes footage of the obvious zoom hack, raid...
I was gonna say, they are way too zoomed out. Because, like, I'm looking at this, and I'm like, is this a program? Or, like, I'm like, am I looking at, like, a player POV right now? This is way too zoomed out. It's a... What was that?
Or Retribution, and includes footage of the obvious zoom hack,
Zoom
raid buff
hack?
timers
They
visible,
cheated?
as well as player hitbox
Oh no,
pinpoint,
this is
which
familiar
was
now.
uploaded before their clear.
This is familiar now. There was a group that cheated in an ultimate. I'm getting a vague memory of like hearing tidbits here and there. Oh no, this is heartbreaking.
Even occurred. Clearly this footage had been shared by somebody within the group who had an axe to grind for whatever reason. This was very bad for them. The usage
Oh, yeah, of course. Somebody leaked the footage of their kill. They would have never have known. Oh yeah, but without context. I see that emote. I see it, but like without context, I don't know what that is. Like, come on, when you're new to Final Fantasy, you don't know anything. Like, I don't know what that emote is. Like, how do I don't know that that's abnormal. I also don't know if it's been edited to make the emote, if that makes sense. Like, now I know what that emote is, okay. UAV Online. Oh my god, I've heard UAV Online. Hang on. Okay, it's that emote, UAV on... Right, I get... Oh my god, it makes so much sense now. Wait. Oh... I get it now. Wait, UAV... Oh my gosh. All right, I get it now. I am no longer lacking critical information. I see. So they would have never have known that they cheated if it wasn't for somebody feeling bad or angry that they cheated to get the kill. Because I suppose if they never if they never posted the video, they would have never have known, right? That's sad. Yeah. I mean, would you feel proud of yourself if you got the race to world first through cheating? That might weigh on some people's conscience. Maybe not everyone. Maybe some of you could deal with that. Maybe some of you would be like, you know what, whatever. But maybe it did weigh on somebody's conscience. Like, if you're going to go through something like this, and it almost feels like the win is taken from you, even though you have the win, it doesn't feel like a win. I feel like it's very easy to go, no, you know what? Like, a clear is a clear. But being in that situation, you'd almost feel like it was stolen from you. And it wouldn't feel real. It wouldn't feel noble. You'd be disappointed. It would feel bad, I think. I don't know. But maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe the glory, or maybe you just deal with that in silence and that just weighs a little bit on your conscience forever. But who cares? It's still world first. But anyway.
Third-party tools in FF14 is very explicitly against terms of service.
Yeah,
and while there's no form of anti-cheat
no wonder they were so far ahead of everyone.
Have been known to actively take action against those to be proven to be utilizing it if it's put in their field of view. And a world-first group in the Japanese seed where the development team was based, provably using something much more egregious than just ACT, was a concern. What eventually came to light in a semi-confirmed rumour is that one of their support players outed their third-party usage as revenge. Unnamed had multiple bench players, and they had reached an agreement to be taken through the fight by the main group once the first clear had happened.
Oh, the drama!
At some point that agreement had been broken, and the offer was suddenly no longer on the table, resulting in the 9th man unleashing his secret weapon that he'd stockpiled for some reason.
Ooh.
There must have been some real internal tension for things to rise to this peak, and I certainly don't envy them. The Japanese community did not take kindly to this. A Twitter criticism storm begun. Huge arguments broke out across the community, and players began to harass members of the group on ults in the form of big, naked Rogadans, covering up their attempts to show off their new weapons in Limsa. Some members of Unnamed then took to social media to explain themselves, and I make a note here when I say these may not be fully 100% accurate translations. They include a very short apology, a fairly non-committal, well, other groups use them too section, and then explain that...
Yeah, I'm sorry, but... sorry that you're offended. Yeah, but everyone else was using it. Wait, were they? Were other teams using it too?
Of the group share solidarity and take the blame.
Sorry for you.
Then, Naoki Yoshida himself made an official statement on the FF14 Lodestone. Now this...
Oh no. Oh no. We disappointed Dad. Oh no. Oh. Oh no. Oh. Oh, I'm almost scared. And also, like, really sad that, like, Yoshi P would genuinely be so disappointed. Oh, can you imagine disappointing Yoshi P? Oh.
This was serious. He noted that an official investigation would be undertaken and they would enact temporary or permanent account bans to anybody found guilty. He reiterated that third-party tools are considered utterly unacceptable by Square Enix and acknowledged the leaked God Mode video that spread early in Phase 5 proc, as well as a leaked video showing the fight's ending cutscene which had been obtained through game manipulation, and that once more they're being investigated. He then closed out the statement with his personal thoughts on the matter, noting that he, as a gamer, wants to be able to cheer on racers and proggers, but when things like this happen, he will not acknowledge the world race or its winners for the foreseeable future, and that
just let that sink in a little bit. Oh, that makes you really sad, doesn't it? He isn't angry. He is disappointed. The Ultimate Raid series is the most difficult battle content within Final Fantasy XIV, and we release this content after testing that it can be cleared without the use of any third-party tools. However, if the presumption is that this content will be tackled and cleared with the use of third-party tools, then any reason to develop high-difficulty battle content seems to be lost. Oh, this feels like a dagger to my heart. It's very difficult for me to understand as a gamer what the meaning behind using numerous third-party tools to compete to clear World First would be. I want to apologise specifically to the many of you who are continuing towards clearing this content without the use of third-party tools, consistently streaming your progress and continuing the trial and error process. However, please know that the development and operations teams take notice of all your passion. Please be sure to take proper care of yourselves as you continue to tackle the Omega Protocol Ultimate. If the illicit use of third-party tools is made clear through our investigations, I, at the very least, will not recognise that team as the true world first. Oh, that is so sad. I mean, yeah, he has every right to be angry and disappointed and sad. It's dishonourable, isn't it? Every right to be disappointed.
in this case, he does not recognise Unnamed as the world first Omega Protocol clear. I'm not going to get deeper into the third party debate that I think is a hot topic right now because this is neither the time nor place. I do however plan on discussing it in future, in a more appropriate scenario, but it's indisputable that what happened on this day definitely brought a whole new level of attention to the issue. A similar situation occurred during the Epic of Alexander, where the World First group used a third-party plugin that automatically moved markers for them. And they were not directly penalised, but instead, the entire FF14 community was. The ability to place markers in combat at all was completely removed in the next patch. But this is the first time direct action was taken.
These 1%ers ruining the game for the rest of us! These filthy 1%ers!
Against players for failure to comply with terms of service in a world first clear. Speaking of action taken, here's what happened as a result of all this fallout. Offenders who were part of the group, but not the leaked POV, were contacted by GMs and told that their accounts will not receive penalty, but their clear will be revoked, including the loss of their achievement and title, and they were ordered to discard their top weapon. That's right, the GMs did not remove the weapons.
Oh my god, it really is like disappointing your parents. You have to remove the weapon yourself. Oh, that is a serious, like, you think about what you have done moment. Wow. They're not going to automatically remove the weapons. They have to do that themselves and really, like, think about what you have done. Oh, they were really upset. I mean, look, every right to be upset with cheating.
They made the players do it themselves. FF Logs and the charity World Race stream also removed Unnamed from the race page, deleting their first place ranking entirely. Numerous players from the group past and present, or even those associated tangentially, either took extended breaks from the game, deactivated their Twitters, or in rarer cases, deleted their FF14 service accounts entirely.
Oh.
We got some good memes out of it at least. This meant that, in the eyes of
Wait, hold on. What was that?
we got some good
I'm standing out here on the International Space Station. I feel like I need to go through the memes now that I've watched some of this video. Like, because I haven't seen any of the memes. I've obviously missed out on all the inside jokes. I've heard UAV online, but I didn't know what that meant. With no context, obviously. Like, lacking critical information all the time. I feel like we should do, like, a meme review. No, I want to see all the memes now that I kind of understand the context.
memes out of it at least. This meant that, in the eyes of most, World First was still up for grabs. This wasn't over.
Oh, Preach did it when we casted Echo's blind TOP day 1. Preach did a UAV online meme where, at the time I had no idea what he was doing. I just was going with it. Like, yeah, he's in a space station for some reason. I was like, yeah, sure, we'll just go with it. I don't know what's happening. Like, let me just zoom on in. Oh yeah, let me go from the space station. So I was just like, yeah, okay, we're in a space station now, sure. We're riding around on a blow-up cactus that's glowing, and now we're in a TV, and now we're in a space station. I was just like, Final Fantasy XIV is nuts. Oh no. Oh no, he looks so disappointed. Oh no. Oh. Yeah, no, the meme, I can imagine. Everyone had a right laugh of this. Good, nice yoke. Ugh. Oh no. Zoom's Zoom hack memes.
I think I was in the right spot, wasn't I? Oh my. Dude, here we go, dude. You would have. I think I was in the right spot, wasn't I? Oh my. Dude, here we go, dude. You would have known if you would have zoomed out. Strummer, just zoom out. Can't double check. You're too zoomed in. You didn't zoom out. No wonder you're white. Jesus Christ. Holy moly.
I just put I did really like bad movement. You know what's right? Yeah.
Can't see Chris.
That was so good. Wait. I love it. No. Another Zeus one. Right, that's it. No, I'm not clicking on any more links. That's it. You've lost your privilege to... No, that's it. No more links. Right, that's it. I'm done.
Over by any means. Groups were still pulling the boss. Streams were still live. And there was still everything to play for. Even if it had been
1 out of 3 daily quests.
By the events that had gone down. The emotional roller coaster that had been spectating the events of the last day had been something to behold, even for players. But this was their opportunity to shake it off and really make their mark. And make their mark Kindred did, capitalizing on Ottonut's withdrawal from the race and their constantly improving level of consistency in Phase 5. They pulled out this excellent pull, pushing Omega below 20%, the HP percentage everyone assumed to be the success threshold once more. The Enrage here pushed the raid into the Wolves' death zone, and as the cast goes off, hearts in their throats, they waited, watched, and witnessed this at long last.
Let's fucking go!
Witnessed what? It's a flashbang! Oh!
Oh my god.
Oh. Alpha, why are you here? Same size. Aww. So cute. Aww. Your thoughts, they are incomprehensible. Yes, together we may prevail. Further testing is required. Citrona, assist me with this evaluation. Wait, it's not over? I thought it was over. Is that not the
Alpha
end?
appears, attempting to comfort the
What?
true...
I thought the fight was over. Hang on a minute. I thought it was over. I thought we won. There's another phase? What? I thought it was over.
However, the tests are not over. Not yet. Omega F absorbs Alpha, having unlocked the...
What? Did you give Alpha back right now?
Attempting to comfort the truly defeated Omega. However, the tests are not over. Not yet. Omega F
Save
absorbs
him.
Alpha, having
Save
unlocked the powers
Alpha.
of Dynamis and transformed into Alpha Omega, combining elements of each form that came before it. This is Omega's ultimate form. Now it's time for your final evaluation. In this phase, Alpha Omega brings its full force to bear, not holding back for even a
Save
moment.
him!
Each new cast throughout this phase is accompanied by dialogue from the boss, as it narrates and
Poor
embellishes
Alpha.
on the sheer magnitude of the attacks it harnesses to defeat you. The encounter opens with Cosmo Memory, a massive raid damage that instantly kills practically everybody who hit this point for the first time. It deals a flat-out unsurvivable amount of damage, but there's a twist. You can carry a Limit Break 3 into this phase if you don't use it in the previous part of the fight, meaning you can throw up Tank LB to survive the hit. But that's not all.
Wait. I'm memeing with the save him. Okay? We understood. Yes. Oh no, excuse me. Actually, in the story, Alpha actually wanted to be in the Omega, and actually they're best friends with us. I was joking.
If you were diligent throughout the duration of Phase 5, building stacks of quickening Dynamis on each player and entering this final battle with 3, your buff will transform upon witnessing Cosmo Memory, evolving into brilliant Dynamis as your own powers spark and flare into action to protect you. If a player with brilliant Dynamis uses Limit Break, it will regenerate just a handful of seconds later, expending most of the potency of the buff. It also has the secondary effect of extending the tank limit break to last for the rest of the phase. As long as you maintain your Dynamis buff by not dying, you're protected, and it's the only way to survive the mechanics in this final phase. This means that each player can contribute one limit break to getting through what's to come, and then you get one final second use of an LB by a person to expend that gauge for the last time. Cosmo Arrow begins,
Wait, it's going up so
concentrating
fast.
the piercing rays of 10 million suns towards you. People quickly started to refer to this as exasquares. Initial telegraphs go out, showing one of two patterns, and then they pulse, and anyone caught within their trap will fall immediately.
That looks
The most realistic
ridiculously
way
hard.
to deal with this was memorization and repetition, watching footage back and developing a rhythm to follow in your mind, while keeping an eye on the incoming Cosmo Dive
Wow,
cast.
that looks
Here
so
Omega brings forth the
difficult.
velocity of a worm, bringing forth the Dragoon LB animation, and right as exasquares finish resolving, dropping AoE busters on the two closest targets and a huge stack on the furthest. The party is ideally setting up their mitigation midway through these dodges in order to get skills on cooldown, because Phase 6 is tight when it comes to mitigation checks, especially for tanks. One late cooldown can often just flat out spell an instant wipe. The group will then need to stack in the middle in preparation for unlimited wave cannon, Omega's attempt to scorch you with the fires which incinerated the Dragon Star. These are exaflares. Lots of exaflares. Covering the entirety of one side of the arena edge and blasting through the middle. To survive, you need to loop around behind them as a party, avoiding the chasing circle AoEs that follow you. After getting through, Alpha Omega hits each player individually, chunking their shields and health and requiring a loose spread, before finishing off this barrage with one last wave cannon. A party stack which needs the tanks at the front, mitigating the much stronger hit on them. After the initial attempts to thwart you failed, the combinations begin instead. Cosmo Arrow and Wave Cannon repeat, this time acting in tandem, forcing you to spread while dodging, the final blast baiting out tank invulnerabilities and requiring rapid heals.
Hard.
Then comes Unlimited Wave Cannon into Cosmo Dive, and should the party survive, Alpha Omega proclaims to you to witness the extent to which it's evolved, beginning the cast of Cosmo Meteor as huge AoEs drop under each player. Adds in the form of comets and meteors spawn, while intense damage rains on everybody, forcing them to spread and the healers to expend valuable resources. The only way to destroy these comets and meteors in time is to use caster and range limit break, utilizing the caster to eliminate the smaller comets and deal significant damage to the meteors.
The floor is lava!
And then the range limit break to shoot through the boss and the 2 remaining larger meteors. 3 flares appear as the range is preparing their limit break. The 5 unmarked players need to stack, and the group must adjust around whichever mechanic the ranged has at the time in order to keep everyone alive. Magic number occurs twice after this, which needs a tank LB3 on cast to survive, then a healer LB right afterwards to cleanse the resulting debuff, and then all its experiments concluded, all its tricks encountered, Alpha Omega cycles into Enrage, and it's a simple DPS race for the win.
Oh, this must be such a tense race to the
not have a high level of
finish.
complexity, but rather than supremely difficult to understand or even execute, I would call it punishing. It asks for a good deal of the player, and if one person mistimes their mitigation,
What an
forgets something or
ending.
positions poorly, it does not allow you to recover. You're done. Come back in 15 minutes. That is if you're able to consistently get there in the first place. As groups crept across the entrance to Phase 6 one by one, beginning their path to progressing, optimizing and learning, it was just a matter of time. Whichever static managed to make it through this marathon cleanly, with enough damage, would be crowned.
That's like a
And the
real
first to
race
make it
to
on
the
stream,
end. That must have been so exciting to watch.
Keep hitting the boss. Next up is Magic
Nari's
Number.
LB.
Oh,
Nari LB followed by Komachi.
oh my
It's gonna
god,
be
you would
easy
have
faint and
a
add-on.
serious
now.
case of the shakies.
This is Komachi's LB.
Ooh. Oh, I can't
Maybe now.
watch, but I can. Ugh.
Next up is going to be Bagel LB and the Carrot LB. It's going to be Nari Ret. Callie will LB after Carrot. Buffs and pots if you have it.
Remember the
coming
pot
out.
now. Yeah.
Callie LB.
Callie LB.
If you have not potted, now is the time to do so. Technical in 5.
Send everything you have.
Surely this is it, right? I don't know. Just hit it.
Get the fucking boss.
Tree.
Give me my fucking chair! Give me my chair! Give me my fucking chair! Yeah!
Oh my god!
Let's go!
Yes! I was here!
Kindred.
I
Their
wish.
journey had been long, with over a week and a half between their first pull and the last. But they had done it. They were the first stream team to claim victory, and as they cheered a sigh of pure relief and caught their breath, the victory cutscene rolled.
The power was mine. I obtained the unmeasurable, and now my end is come. Wait, did Alpha explode? Why are there feathers every... Oh. I thought... okay, no, it's fine. I thought he just exploded into feathers. Boop! This does not compute. Not an end, you say? We continue onwards. Together. Yes, we have seen you out in the open world many times. 2 times now. We shaved him. Wait, we did, because he lost feathers. Acknowledged. I accept your proposal. Aww. Your contribution to my experiment is appreciated. Without your unrelenting strength, I would have never realized this new potential. I will embark on a journey, observing and recording all that I encounter. Farewell, mortals. This world has much to teach me. Aww. The two best friends. Aww. Two roommates. Wow.
The Omega Protocol will be remembered forever, for both the good and the bad. It has brought some of the most intense individual skill checks Final Fantasy XIV has ever seen, and it came together in a package which is, as I'm recording this, the hardest fight in the entire game. There were ups and downs, triumphs and sobering moments. The controversy which occurred with the World First group, the leaking of their third-party usage, and both the resulting storm of criticism and Square Enix's official intervention into the affair painted a concerning picture for the world race going forward. And the encounter itself pushed the limits of what many felt was a reasonable expectation of the player base to come up against. In particular, the usage of automatic markers via third-party tool became rampant to solve the acquisition of Quickening Dynamis in Phase 5, and a good percentage of criticism related to that has fallen on the fight's design. Kindred would stick together and keep performing well in upcoming Endwalker raid progressions, making for an incredibly successful expansion for them as a group. And I'm sure every player will look back on this progression, on everything they achieved together, on the moment they became the very first on-stream Alpha Legends with the world at their backs, and smile. And for me, what the Omega Protocol did more than anything else is make me excited for Dawntrail and what comes next. When it comes to Ultimate, I think the best is yet to come.
Oh, so emotional. Oh, what an amazing video. Wow. Oh my goodness. That was so well made. That was so hype. Oh, what an incredible video. Both of them were so good. I feel like I watched a movie, and that's a raid fight. Oh, my goodness. I didn't realize. You know, I heard the Ultimates were some of the most challenging content available in MMOs, and seeing it is just totally different. I'm sure playing it is totally different, but hearing about it, I was like, okay, I'm really excited. Now I'm like, yeah, no, no, it looks so fun. It looks ridiculously difficult. It looks insanely fun. And what an achievement. What a feat of strength conquering an ultimate is. My goodness. When you see these fights, it is mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing.